Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this, welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. That is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya, and welcome to episode 170. And on this week's episode of the show, I will be reviewing the complete Season 2 of Gen V, The Boys spinoff. Is it leading into Season 5? How did this deal with its own show, as well as the expanded Boys universe? All of those spoilers will be included in the review because the whole show is now available for the viewing public. So you have been warned. Full spoilers ahead. Let's jump into Season 2 of Gen V.
Hurry. You're early. We're not quite ready for you yet. Could you come back in like an hour or two?
If you let everyone go, I won't kill you.
Well, that sounds like a really nice offer.
Before we really get started into Season 2 of Gen V, I did discuss the first 3 episodes a couple weeks back, where I looked at everything in those episodes. For the most part, this is going to be looking at 4 through 8, as well as the season as a whole. And my thoughts on Season 1 of Gen V were, I would say, more mixed than probably would be suspected, given how much I love this franchise. But Season 2 for me really takes everything I liked about Gen V and it amplifies it even more so. Dealing with the aftermath of The Boys Season 4, and what's so interesting about what we see in Godolphin University and the world outside of the school, with limited windows into that, is that even with Homelander leading the government to some degree, you don't really see this dramatic change. Of course, there's this rise in political violence and the extremism from political opinions, which has always been a part of The Boys and is continually amped, specifically with the consequences of Season 4 and most of the boys being captured or being fugitives. And a lot of that leads into this season. What I appreciate from Godolphin University as that setting is it does work as its own microcosm of everything that's been going on, where you have people on the different sides of what's going on. You have Homeland fans, of the TV show, as well as Starlighters, and where that pits everybody within the show. What's really fascinating to me is with the influx of so much social media reaction to everything, shows have had to deal with that concept and with the predictive nature in everybody putting their theories out into the internet, which has happened before, but it is happening more and more. If you were following along with the theorizing lead into Peacemaker, people had a significantly tracked the fact that we had never seen any flags or any minorities in the second Earth that Chris Smith was visiting. And of course, it did lead to the reveal that it was a Nazi-run planet. In this show, I'm just going to get right into the main twist of this, which was that Cypher was in fact being controlled by Thomas Godolphin. Yes, it is probably frustrating if you were a viewer and you read that theory and then only to have it be revealed in the final 2 episodes that you would be somewhat disappointed. And while that twist is a very well executed one, the problem, and this is a benefit of the show, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, when you have so many eyeballs and vocal fans following these things, they're going to look for any breadcrumbs that they can tie theories together. I think it is commendable that people predicted this, that they were on the right track. But what that does for this show, specifically with the use of Thomas and Polarity's character, is it really amplifies the thing I liked of when they pitched the idea of Gen V to fans of The Boys, which was, we are going to show you Charles Xavier's mansion, or not mansion, it is a mansion, but Charles Xavier's School for the Gifted within the Boys universe. Now, I know, Scotty Cameron, you're listening to this. I don't know how much of this is from the comics. I have not read any of them. I don't really plan on doing that. I appreciate that this show, under Eric Kripke and everybody else involved, this show is being show-run by, his name has Michel Fazekas. If I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize. That this world, to me, was a complete unknown. I was completely unaware of any real details in the comics, vague things because of how they've been popping up as the show has run on. But this show takes that X-Men reference and it amplifies it dramatically. Getting a character like Cypher when he is introduced and Hamish Linklater's performance as that character was so fascinating because of his use and abuse of his powers while also using them to what seemed to be superhuman in favor, which is, of course, we have this idea that was introduced in The Boys, and it continues to be a part of season 2 of Gen V, which is humans versus superpowered people, metahumans, or there's another name for them in X-Men that's escaping me. That's a scientific term, and I'm really mad that I've forgotten it. Homo superior, that's what they're called. And Cypher as that character, and him taking, not control, well, it's a flip side of that he is being controlled by Thomas Godolkin, who gave himself the serum compound V serum 0.1 or 1.0, and he doesn't age. He's like some of the OGs that we had before, is really fascinating because it shows from the get-go that the people involved with creating these superpowered people, their ideology was so specific and quite frankly horrible. If you know that these heroes came out of World War II, it was a very, very politically charged time. Completely unlike everything that's happening right now, obviously. But that character and the twist that he is a puppet for Thomas Godolkin gives us an insight into a flip of motivation. We get to see an evil Charles Xavier, that being Thomas Godolkin, who can control people. Obviously, if you're a longtime X-Men fan, there are versions of the comics where things go wrong, and we of course have Charles Xavier's twin sister. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm specifically referencing the idea that the person who runs the school is the evil mastermind of the story. And I liked how from the get-go, as I said in the first 3 episodes, Marie and her friends were already outwardly against Cypher. That it was this mutual assured destruction that led to Marie's history being revealed to her, this project being a system in which was designed to create the next superhuman that would go beyond what they thought was even possible. And what I appreciate about that introduction with the Odessa project is you need to give us some semblance of belief that someone is going to take down Homelander. Season 3 of The Boys really did focus on that by giving Billy powers, as well as the introduction of his father, Soldier Boy, played by Jensen Ackles, and we know he's going to be back in season 5 of the show. You'd have to have him in there, as well as the fact that he has a newfound ability from being trapped by the Russians, where he can take away people's powers. The idea of a chosen one mentality being thrust upon a woman of color in America is a really compelling story point, specifically because we know Marie's trauma. Her killing her own family, losing her sister, being raised in group homes only to be thrust into fame, and only for that to be emphasized after the results of season 1, going into season 2 where she has escaped being a prisoner, and the significant pushback from her friends on this idea, and Cypher, ironically, even though they wind up becoming antagonistic to each other, that he does need her because of his ultimate drive for control. It's not this optimistic, hopeful ability that I want you to be the best, so that way we can take down Homelander. Of course, everyone around her probably sees that, but for somebody who has had such a traumatic youth to be thrust into this idea that you are unlike anything we've had before, and the only thing she's ever wanted to do is to belong, not to be somebody who is the eye of everyone, and to be chosen to be this god that could control everybody. And this concept that's introduced specifically in this season about somebody's powers leveling up, similar to that of physical prowess with exercise or talent with a sport, that the more you practice and the more that you're pushed, there's a likely possibility that you will be able to reach the next level in what you're capable of. And Marie's bloodbending, for having no other way to describe it, for that power to be introduced earlier in the show and to see how important it could be with Newman and now Marie, and seeing the gradual evolution that she has, saving her sister from death, not being able to save Kate, removing the traumas and the brain tearing that Polarity was experiencing, that she can quite literally heal the sick. She is the second coming for those who are choosing to view her that way, and it'll be very interesting to see how her relationships evolve, and more than anything, and I know I'm going to be jumping around here, so I apologize, but them all being recruited by A-Train and Annie, which is going to be very compelling. We've had a prison break in this season. I think that was one of the only real parts of the show that I didn't really love, was constantly going back to that one set. I understand now the show shoots in the greater Toronto area, so we can only use so many of the schools at a time, but the prison set was one that didn't necessarily really feel like it fit in the premier budget that the show normally has. And that was all right. We needed that environment to constantly remind us of what had happened to Andre. And the use of and this is going to sound not necessarily great, but what happened to Chance was obviously tragic. And to use his character, the death of Andre within the show, and how that affected everybody emotionally, and we get to explore more of his relationship with everyone as well as his dad in the aftermath of that trauma, to have somebody, and this is what I dug about Polarity's role in the show, which is he's our stand-in for Magneto, but he is on the flip side of that coin where, yes, he starts off doing this for completely selfish reasons that you would completely understand. Cypher caused the death of his son. And that's a very Magneto thing for a character to feel, to be single-minded in their focus, but ultimately, when he goes toe-to-toe with Cypher and finally Thomas Godolkin, that it's one of a much grander solution, that he's doing this for everyone. This concept of wiping out the weak, superpowered people because we are supposed to be the superior race is a very Magneto thing. And to have these two ideologies flipped on their head and having those two characters go to battle as essentially the final boss of this season was really entertaining. And I commend everybody involved, because it's so difficult to approach a narrative-based show when an actor passes away. It's normally a recast or they're written off, and you don't really want to address that. But Chance's role as Andre in this show was so fundamental, and to make that character still feel as impactful when he's not on screen at all is really a testament to how people wanted to honor the creation of that character and the legacy that he will have in the Boys universe. He is the crux of why pretty much everybody is doing what they're doing, why they feel this drive to defeat Cypher and ultimately Thomas Godolkin, because of Andre's death is a result of him pushing himself too far. And it is only in the first real conflict that Polarity has with Cypher that he sees that he is the only person that is capable of preventing Cypher from taking over somebody's mind. This season, more than I would say The Boys in general, really takes familiar powers and spins them on their head. I like the idea that we continually are exploring the effects of mental health on one's superheroics. If you're a child of the 90s and grew up through the 2000s, you're not unfamiliar with a lot of these ideas. Spider-Man 2, probably one that put it on the forefront for moviegoers, but Emma's exploration of what her powers are capable of and not having to be something where she's self-harming, as well as Marie, somebody who doesn't have to create or cut themselves to create those tendrils of blood, that she can affect somebody on a microscopic level, as well as Sam, who's dealing with now being one of the best heroes in the aftermath of the death of his father, being somebody who sided initially with Vought because of Kate, and how that relationship with Kate specifically is one of antagonism is really compelling, because a character who thinks they're doing the right thing for others only to be manipulated by that organization is a significant element in this entire universe. Sometimes people are doing selfish things because they believe it's the right thing to do for everybody, and to see characters truly have dramatic shifts in their perspective is also a really rewarding one. The relationship between Marie and Kate was one that is very much a focus of this show. Marie is the reason she loses access to her powers and no longer becomes a fundamental part of Cypher's plan to cull the herd. And it is only through the experiences of season 2, when Marie is able to learn what she is capable of, that she does eventually give Kate her powers back. They have a great back and forth that there's this concept of the trust has been completely broken between them. And of course, I would not give you this ability that you would then abuse as you have done in the past. That the events of this season you are completely responsible for is something significant. When she sees Kate, she sees somebody who is responsible for the death of Andre. And it is only Andre's dad that makes Marie come to this realization that there is more at stake here than just this petty squabble that we're having, regardless of us being emotionally motivated by our loss. There's something we can do that will honor the legacy of Andre. And I really like how bringing in Sean Patrick Thomas as Polarity for this show maintains that character as a father, as well as his own hero who has felt he has failed his son prior to him being arrested and brought into Elmira. This season is really fascinating because it does feel like it is the end of Gen V as a story, having this deal with the aftermath of The Boys season 4, with things have obviously changed, while still being a continuation on Gen V season 2. But clearly, this is ramping up to where we are going in The Boys season 5. If it does not sort of feel like the Infinity War, just in the size of the ensemble, we know all of our main Gen V characters are going to be involved in some capacity. I'd be disappointed if maybe some of them are killed off screen, but our main characters of Marie, Emma, Kate, Derek/Jordan, and Sam, I would really like to see where they are involved. Obviously, Marie will be one of the people responsible for the death of Homelander. We know that they are the only two surviving children of Project Odessa, and of course that was important. I really liked seeing how we had more and more parts of The Boys within this story. I think that was smart to blend those elements in together. We had the Deep, we had Black Noir, we also had Sister Sage in this show, and then the confirmation that A-Train is fully on board with this revolution going against the Homelander government. It's really interesting, and I liked season 4 of The Boys, and I was already excited with the conclusion of that season and how it was a significant cliffhanger. And this show being in between those seasons really does help build out the world, but it also provides such a substantial direction for the show to be going in. Is this going to be a continual recruitment of heroes required to take down Homelander? I'm really hoping we don't have to go and find Soldier Boy again, that they just happen to know where he was. Giancarlo Esposito showing up for a minute to show us that, I was the slimy businessman, and yes, I can still be a good guy, but I am still the slimy businessman that everybody knows who was running Vought beforehand, was super funny. I like this show a lot. I think from a complete narrative standpoint, Gen V doesn't need a season 3, especially given The Boys season 5, at least in my opinion, will likely be the conclusion to the modern part of this story. We know with Vought Origins, or Vought Rising as it's actually titled, will be about the foundation of the Seven and the early years. It actually was shooting in Toronto when I was there in the summer. So I am really curious to see how that show is going to deal with The Boys being over, because season 5 will be the final season of The Boys. I don't know if I need Gen V season 3. I think this show really felt like a great conclusion to school's over, we're going on to the next adventure, similar to something like Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, where Deathly Hallows was a road trip. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get a bunch of that from The Boys season 5. I really like this season. I think it is certainly slower to get going, and while it doesn't have the highs that you would necessarily suspect expect from a season of The Boys. I found this season much more enjoyable because it had a much simpler narrative focus. Marie dealing with the chosen one ideology as well as her relationships becoming much more complex was really entertaining. And I like that this show never forgets that its maturity is in the storytelling, not just in the gratuitous violence, which of course is a part of it as well. I really dug Gen V Season 2. Let me know what you thought in the comments and what you think we are going to see in The Boys Season 5. That will do it for my Gen V Season 2 review. Now let's jump into listener mail and comments from last week's episode.
Can I ask you a question? Just one?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's episode is what obscure superpower would you like? Andreas said Nico Robin flower fruit, easily the best. I don't know what that's referring to. Just Gray said Jordan Lee is goated. Okay. Nunnut59, Kate's power is goated. That's true. There's a lot of good mind control in this season, and I like the use of it a lot. And we see the abuse and benefits of that, of course. Gorlock, Harper, if the world was full of soups. All right. Tomato Guy, 2000. I don't know, but I definitely wouldn't want Hempels. I'd say hit me up with enhanced strength and accelerated healing factor. Well, healing factor, although popularized by Wolverine, I would say is more in that obscure category. Briley says Jordan got some fire-ass powers, not gonna lie. All right. And then we have user 36901115886273 said telekinesis. Dylan writes in, Good Fortune sounds pretty good. Gotta check it out before it's out of theaters. I think I would have the ability to freeze time and therefore basically have super speed and be able to finally catch up on sleep. Okay, so the concept of that's really fascinating because I talked to somebody about this actually recently, which is, yes, if you were freezing time, you would be moving more quickly than other people. But as somebody who lives outside of the Toronto area, which has been described as the worst traffic in North America, if I freeze time and I could drive a motorcycle through the highways of the Toronto area, but that would freeze all of the cars. So there's this, you would also need super speed to make that worth it. So Dylan, let me know if you just want to be the Flash. Because if that's what you're saying, I totally understand what you're saying there, and that makes sense. I'm guessing this is Semo Demo 0159 on YouTube says, the ability to plant thoughts or images or normal thoughts of anything I want, it would make it way easier to explain anything, just send them straight to the brain. So you want a mind meld, which is cool. It's very Vulcan of you. Mud Abushi says control grief in people. If that was used effectively to help people with the grieving process, I think that would be absolutely incredible. Scotty Cameron, here he is. Does telekinesis count as an obscure power? Seeing movies like Chronicle and even Push have made the idea of moving solid objects with my mind. It could even create the illusion of flight or super strength. If I were to go more obscure, I would say absorbing atomic energy like Captain Atom or Major Force. Those are really good ones, Scotty. I do think telekinesis is fairly popular, so I wouldn't technically count it as obscure. I would even say shrinking is not obscure, given the fact that one of the main Avengers has that ability. I think more obscure would be something like hydrokinesis, which only a certain amount of characters have. Mira has it in the Aquaman comics a lot of the time, and Calderam has some sort of use with it, although his abilities are somewhat magic-based at times. Even magic feels like sort of an obscure power, even though it's obviously in an entirely different realm of supernaturability. So no, I don't know. It's interesting. We got a lot of things in here that are references to characters, which is cool, and I appreciate that. But I think that was funny. Obviously, people reacted somewhat negatively to my top 5 baseball films, which I wasn't necessarily surprised by. I understand a lot of people have a lot of feelings on the baseball not franchise, although there are baseball franchises, but there's a lot of significant movies in that genre. And the more fictionalized ones tend to be more entertaining, but obviously the ones in my top 5 were much more in the biopic genre. And for the most part, I liked the baseball films that I put in my top 5. This week's question of the week is connected to Halloween. I will be discussing the premiere of season 2 of Has Been Hotel next week. So it's simple. What is your favorite movie to watch on Halloween? To let me know, you can email the podcast, filmreelistspod@gmail.com, or you can comment below on YouTube or Spotify, as well as commenting on any of the social media posts. Just make sure to include the hashtag QOTW. Thanks so much to everybody for listening to the show. If you haven't yet, and this is your first time listening, please follow on your preferred podcast platform, or go to YouTube and subscribe there. The podcast is slowly crawling towards monetization, which would be absolutely incredible for this little show to reach that goal in just over 3 years would be amazing. I've got a lot of really cool stuff planned, so make sure you're listening to the show to hear your favorite things discussed on it. If there's something coming up and you don't know if it's going to be on the podcast schedule, let me know. Shoot me an email at any of the social medias. They're linked in the bio site. Thank you to everybody for listening. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I will see you next time.